Recent update on a mandamus that I filed on behalf of a client. So the case in question that was unreasonable, we had experienced unreasonable delays by USCIS is called a I-730 petition. And what that is it's a petition filed for someone who's been granted asylum to bring their family over if they are still abroad in the home country. So in my case, my client applied for asylum. He was granted. 1 year later, he applied for permanent residence, received his green card, and then he filed 730s to get his spouse and children over to the United States. Um, and normally, the processing times for USCIS for this type of petition is usually several months, less than a year. In his case, for unknown reasons, immigration just sat on the 730 petitions. And by the time the client contacted me, it was pending for 5.5 years with immigration with no updates, no explanation, nothing. So I advised the client that we can file a mandamus to really get this petition moving at the very least, just to find out why this case fell through the cracks, right? So he agreed to do that. We filed the petition in federal court. And then basically when you file a mandamus, the government, meaning USCIS or whoever is the government agency that you're suing, they have 60 days as the defendant to file some kind of a response to federal court. Um, and usually what happens after you file mandamus is within those 60 days, there is a U.S. attorney who is assigned to the case, right? So the U.S. Attorney's Office represents all government agencies that are being sued. Usually the AUSA will go to their client, in this case, it was USCIS, and ask them what's going on, find out more about the case. Why is this taking so much longer than normal? Um, and for almost the whole period of time of 60 days, I did not hear back from the U.S. Attorney's Office. The only updates I saw were that, I saw that an attorney registered with the court to let the court know and to let me know that they were handling this case, but really nothing else besides that. The last few days leading up to the 60-day deadline, then the AU's attorney reached out to me, and they did get USCIS to look at these 730s. What USCIS did was they issued RFEs, requests for evidence. In my client's case, there were three separate petitions that he filed because there were three family members that were stuck abroad. So the client told me that, he checked the USCIS portal, and indeed there were three different RFEs that were issued. So after the RFEs were issued, the AU's attorney came back to me and said, are you willing to agree to stipulate and dismiss this action, this mandamus complaint? Um, so I thought about it for a little bit and I thought, should I oppose it or should I just agree to stipulate it? Um, it wasn't like a very easy decision to make because just because USCIS notified the client that they had issued RFEs doesn't mean that my client immediately knew what it was that immigration was looking for. So he had to wait for the hard copy of the RFEs to be sent to him by immigration by the mail. So it took some time to get all these different RFEs sent to him. Once my client got them, he sent them over to me so I could take a look. And I reviewed the RFEs. In my mind, I think the issues or basically the additional information or documents that immigration was requesting wasn't unreasonable. They were documents that I think my client could obtain without too much difficulty or hardship. So I told the client, look, why don't we respond to this RFE? We basically got what we wanted, right? Because the point of a mandamus is to compel a government agency to do their duty, right? To not drag a case out, not subject someone to unreasonable delays. And here, the tool of the mandamus is to get immigration to do something on your case. which in this case, technically they did. They finally looked at all three 751s and they came up with some additional documents or evidence or information that they wanted. So I told the client, why don't we respond to this RFE? The thing is, if we opposed the mandamus, then what the government would have done was they would have filed a motion to dismiss. And who knows in this climate, like how the magistrate judge would have ruled in this case. The U.S. attorney could have pointed to the fact that because USCIS issued RFEs, they had taken some action. So therefore, the mandamus is now moot. MOOT, not MUTE, meaning like there really isn't so much an issue anymore of immigration just sitting and doing nothing on these cases. So basically that's what we did. I agreed to have the mandamus dismissed rather than, continuing to litigate this and possibly losing by getting the mandamus dismissed. So next step was responding to these RFEs, right? And it took a little work because some of the documents that my client had originally submitted to USCIS at the time of the 730s being filed, they were there were some errors in the way the forms were filled out and the way that some documents were submitted. There was an issue with like some of the English translations of the foreign documents. Mind you, this was a case that I inherited after my client had already filed the 730s with another attorney. So these were issues that did not come up at the time that I filed the mandamus. So I helped the client prepare responses to all three RFEs. We submitted it to USCIS. And then I would say maybe a week later, we got the notice from immigration that all 730s were approved. And the cases are now moving to the next step, which is they are being transferred out of USCIS to the State Department so that the client's family can now get scheduled for their immigrant visa interviews. Now, that's a whole other process. It's not that, the cases are now complete and the client's family now have their visas, but this was a significant hurdle that my client had been facing for 5.5 years, just kind of being stuck in limbo, not knowing what's going on with the 730s. Now that those petitions are approved, I mean, hopefully, my client and his family can proceed with the next steps of, filling out the visa application forms, paying the fees, being scheduled for their visa interviews. But that's an example of how mandamus can really um, be instrumental. And sometimes it's like the only thing that will work when nothing else has worked. When you have made inquiry upon inquiry with USCIS, when you've tried liaison assistance with a congressperson, when you've tried the ombudsman for USCIS, if all else fails, then mandamus is kind of like the last resort. In many cases, unfortunately, the only option. That's not to say that mandamus is effective in every single case. Um, for example, if you have a pending application and there is a possible issue in your case, or if there are red flags, I may not recommend to a client to go ahead and sue the government. You don't want it to blow back against you. Let's say if the application that you have filed with immigration has a discretionary element to it, meaning that there's a chance immigration could deny it, then that's the risk that you take by filing a mandamus. They could come back and say, okay, fine, you want us to take action on this case? Well, we're going to deny your petition or application. So here you go. So you don't want to do that, right? You only want to bring forward a mandamus suit if your application or petition is approvable, meaning it should be approved, because you have to watch out, and because the government could come back and the answer or the action that they take may not be something that you want. So if you're not sure if you have a case that is suitable for mandamus, definitely consult with an attorney who does mandamus actions to screen, right? Because you don't want to end up having a green card denied, revoked, or having naturalization denied, and then all of a sudden immigration realizes, oh, by the way, we should not have granted this person's green card application because XYZ. We didn't know that this person had a conviction, or we didn't know that they had committed fraud or misrepresentation. And it's only now by filing the lawsuit that they are now going back into your entire immigration history and going through everything with a fine-tooth comb. So that's the mandamus update.